Michael Kaskey-Blomain. You can follow him on Twitter at The Real Mike KB. Joins us live from the Wells Fargo Center, where tonight the Sixers try to get revenge from the Kings. The Kings beat them in their house earlier this year. The Sixers play them tonight. Mike, how's it going?
Doing pretty well, Josh. How about you?
Doing pretty good. So we teased it before the other side. Will Joel Embiid play tonight? Mike, the answer is?
The answer is, Josh, we have some bad news. Joel will not be playing tonight. Brett just made the announcement here at Wells Fargo about 5-10 minutes ago. Embiid will be out again tonight.
So it seems like this back issue is a little more than it should be. Have they given any explanation for, is he tight? Is he sore? We heard the term load management earlier this year. Do we have any insight into what is really going on with Embiid?
Yeah, Josh, they call it a soreness. He's been experiencing it now for about since about the beginning of last week, going on a week and a half. It was clearly exacerbated in that triple overtime game against Oklahoma City on Friday. He was clearly in pain and grimacing throughout a lot of that game. So I think, it was pretty much to be expected that he wouldn't play in Chicago last night. I think him sitting out tonight is a little bit more of a surprise and a little bit alarming, considering that, this might be something that is a little more serious than initially we might have thought when it was just announced that it was soreness. I think Brett said this was a decision of the medical staff, not his decision or not Joel's decision. This came from the medical department of the team. They're erring on the side of caution, according to Brett. And I think his, Embiid's past history with the back injury, he had a stress fracture issue in his lower back when he was at Kansas back in 2014. I think that plays a part in it. Obviously a back is something, especially for a big guy of Embiid's size, it's, very important and obviously a concern. So I think all of that goes into it. They're saying they're just erring on the side of caution at this point.
I brought up this theory on my show on Saturday. I'm like, I want to run it by you, and that is, I listened to what Embiid said a couple of weeks ago to Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter about his back after the Timberwolves game. I've seen what's being written and said about Embiid in his back. I'm getting the impression that I don't think he stretches enough, and here's why. There are studies that show that 44% of all back problems are because the hamstrings are too tight. And I have my own back problems. And I am not 7'2" and 22, 23 years old and getting the best care in the world. And yet, guess what? If I don't stretch every day, I'm in crazy amounts of pain and I'm stiff as a board. It doesn't seem like Embiid's really doing a lot of stretching before games. It seems like it's just kind of out there having fun, doing his own thing, which is great for the fans and everything. But it seems like I have to wonder, is he really taking care of his body enough at the level it needs to be to avoid these back problems?
That's a good question, Josh, and it might be an issue of enough compared to other players might not be enough for Joel, meaning that I do think Joel is doing, pretty much everything that he should be doing to take care of his body. He takes, obviously, his health and trying to be out there for the team very seriously. But with that said, considering, his history, his size, and just some of the issues that he has, he might have to go above and beyond what a normal player might do. And in that situation, like you said, they might have to, establish some sort of pregame, regimen where he does something separate from the team to make sure, his back is stretched out, or whether that be something that they do earlier in the day. But, it's definitely, going to become an issue at this point, after giving him a contract of, the size that they did in the season. And you're already starting to see it now. You can see in, the responses to some of the tweets that said that Joel was not playing tonight. There's going to be a level of frustration starting to set in amongst the fan base if it's, he's consistently missing games for something that's, perceived as a soreness or not that big an issue. So I do think that, taking further steps to whether it be stretching or, making sure that he's doing things that help him, during the game to keep his body fresh, they might need to really look to implement that if they, obviously haven't already.
Mike, switching to the actual play on the court for the Sixers, the turnovers are obviously the biggest problem for the Sixers. They lead the league right now in 18 per game. There was a big problem last night against the Bulls in their loss where they basically blew it in the end. As far as Brett Brown and what you have seen, what can they do to fix this turnover problem? Obviously, they're not going to fix this overnight, but have you seen anything for the Sixers? And has Brett Brown even said anything alluding to the fact that there are solutions to fixing these turnover problems?
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I think everyone, if you watch a Sixers game, it's impossible not to notice how much of an impact these turnovers are having on the team, and especially down the stretch where I think, part of it just comes into play being, having the team's two go-to guys being, a rookie in Ben Simmons and a guy that has, just over 50 career games in Joel. Both of those guys lead the team in turnovers per game. And they're the guys that are having the ball down the stretch. Joel is averaging 4 a game. Ben's right there with 3.9. I do think that's part of it. And I think part of it, too, is getting, the ball to guys in position to succeed down the stretch. We have situations where we saw, like last night, J.J. Redick ended up getting stripped in the post down the stretch, where he's just in a position that he shouldn't be in with the ball. He should be, catching on the perimeter and looking to shoot, not necessarily doing that. I think where that would fall to Brett would kind of be to figure out a way to get the guys in position to maximize their skill sets and not, put them in position to try to have to do too much or do something that's outside of, what they would really need to do on a normal basis in the game. I do think it's an issue that can be fixed with experience as, I think as Ben gets just more and more accustomed to being a point guard in the NBA, that the turnovers will pump down. Same with Joel handling the ball on the post. But in the short term, it's something that Brett has definitely acknowledged. Obviously, he knows that they're last in the league. And I think it's a matter of composure and just play calling and, setting the guys up to succeed down the stretch.
Now, as far as guys underperforming this season, the one for me, the biggest one, has to be J.J. Redick. Obviously, they brought him in for a $22 million deal just on 1 year. But, can you kind of go over what has been going on with him? Because he's not to me, he's not playing up to his contract right now. He's getting these open looks. He's also taking wild jump shots off balance. He seems to be going all over the place, and he seems to be very inconsistent so far this season. Can you kind of go over what is going on with him, and is there anything that they can get or that can be done with him to get him going like the guy they signed up for this offseason?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nick. I think the inconsistency is a great way to describe what we've seen from JJ so far. He's had some outings, so far this season where we've seen the JJ Redick that we've seen in the past and that we, expected to sign on for. But those appearances have really just been, too far and in between. And like you said, it seems that there's times where he's kind of rushing his shot, shooting off balance, kind of forcing shots earlier in the clock. And, when he's not making his shots, it's not a situation where, Robert Covington's a guy that's struggled, knocking down shots at times this season. He's been, also inconsistent like JJ, but when he's out there and not knocking down his shots, he's still providing the team with a solid perimeter defender, a solid rebounder for his position, a guy that can contribute more to the floor. With JJ, when he's out there, and if he's not knocking down those shots and providing the team with a consistent deep threat, then it really becomes an issue of, what is he giving the team out there? He's not, he's a serviceable defender at times, but he's certainly not, a defender that anyone fears in the league or that doesn't need help on the perimeter. He's not he's not a great rebounder for his position, not a great passer for his position. And it just becomes, I think his struggles become magnified because he's not really able to contribute in other ways. For JJ himself, every time he's asked about his struggles, he kind of shrugs them off. As shooters do, it's sort of a slump, but I think it will become, kind of concerning down the stretch because this is a guy that we look to sort of bring that veteran presence, and I think he's making, a lot of mistakes especially down the stretch of games for a guy that we're paying to be the veteran. So, he's not there's no in jeopardy of losing his spot. The Sixers brought him to space the floor for Joel and Ben, and just by being out there, he still does that, but he certainly needs to, as you said, Nick, kind of iron things out and become, a little bit more consistent, especially if he wanted to, maybe re-up with this team in the offseason.
We're talking with Michael Kaskey-Blomain, our 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers insider. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. Mike, right now the Sixers, they lead the NFL in turnovers per game. They're 20th in three-point shooting percentage. but they're top 5 in assists. Where do you attribute that to? Now, is that because of the fluctuating lineups? Is that because of this young team? Is that because Brett Brown is still trying to figure out what the best lineup on the floor is? What do you attribute those crazy fluctuation in team stats to?
Yeah, Josh, I think a lot of it is twofold. This is a lot of people obviously want this team to be good right now with the talent and with how long they've had to wait, obviously, over the past few years of the quote-unquote process and the rebuild. I think a lot of these struggles, both in, the stats that you just mentioned and the turnovers and late game situations that we were talking about, can really be chalked up to A, inexperience on the young guys, and B, just a team that hasn't really played together. Most of the guys are new, hadn't played together before this year. Not that that's an excuse, but I certainly think that kind of factors into, some of the inconsistencies and the fluctuations that you see with the team. On games where they're locked in and things are clicking, they look really good. But the problem is that hasn't been an every night basis. There's been too many nights in between where they haven't looked like that. Brett has the system in place to move the ball around. I think it worked really. It does work well. It started to work well at the season. It's dropped off a little bit now as of late with the production. Guys have been not been able to hit. But I think the systems are in place both offensively and defensively. For this team to succeed, the Sixers have had a solid defense throughout Brett's tenure, regardless of who's been out there. They've had the style in place where they want to play up tempo, they want to space the floor, they want to shoot threes, which is perfectly in tune with how the league is playing. And when they have their guys out there and they're full force and Joel's playing and everyone's healthy, they can compete with pretty much anyone. I think at this point the main issue has been injuries and inconsistencies in the rotations in the lineup, and the team has just not been able to click. It's real difficult on a nightly basis if they don't know if their best player is going to be playing, from an hour before tip-off, they find out that he's not playing, then they have to go with Amir Johnson, who provides a completely different, style of play and brings something totally different to the court, which by default is going to, impact the way the team plays and their chemistry together. So I think, really the injuries and the unfamiliarity between the players is a big issue so far this season.
Mike, one more for you. We appreciate your time as we're leading up to Sixers-Kings tonight. You hear the game here on 97.3 ESPN. I'm looking at this team, and I've posed this question to multiple people. I want to pose it to you as well. Is it that we had too high of expectations? Was the ceiling set too high for this team, considering Embiid hasn't played a full season? It's the first season for Ben Simmons. A lot of guys are still getting used to playing together, playing at this level of basketball. Did we underestimate the growing pains and try to aim too high for this team, thinking that they could be possibly a 6-5 or 4 seed, when realistically they're still maybe an 8-7 or 6 seed type of playoff team?
I think so, Josh. I think definitely a little bit. I think people maybe kind of wanted to fast forward a year and kind of skip the growing pain year and the year of getting a rookie Ben Simmons experience, getting a rookie Markelle, a first experience. Now we just want to get him in the lineup, getting Joel back on the floor after missing, basically another 7 months after the knee surgery last year. And, just getting all these players acclimated to the system, I think, especially once the team started, I think they gelled really quickly after those first 3 losses. They kind of went on that little run after the first couple weeks, and I think that elevated expectations a little bit more, and then they kind of came crashing back down to reality over the past couple weeks. But, when I was on prior to the season talking to you and Mike and Pete, I think, I said all along a 500-ish season, fighting for the 8 spot, 7 spot, 9 spot is a realistic goal for this team this season. And if you look where they are right now, I think they're in the 10th spot. They're 14-15. Should probably have won that Bulls game, a couple other games, but they're hovering right around 500. I do think once the second half of the season comes, something will click with this team, just, from the experience and hopefully the health factor, and they'll be able to pull off some, a little bit of string of more wins than losses. So I think, honestly, the team is on pace for what you would expect for a young team that hasn't played with each other much. I think that the expectations probably did simmer a little out of control, but, that's Philadelphia sports for you. But I'm not that concerned with where the team is at. I think other than the injuries, which, of course, are a concern for the long term, I think this team's about where you would expect it to be at this point in the season.
And injuries are always something you can't control. He is Michael Kaskey-Blomain, our 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers insider. Follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB for all your Sixers and NBA news. Mike, enjoy the game tonight, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it.